This is a great topic because at the beginning of the year it can be something that we often have to address and kind of deal with is looking at our team and team structure. But also just like this isn't always just about planning. Sometimes these moments kind of slowly reveal themselves. And whenever they kind of pop up, it's important to recognize the pattern that's there. And if we want to call it out, really the difficulty of making these kind of decisions. I put in the email outreach of like, this is a hard one to talk about because these are often things that there sometimes is harm being done to the company. There is things a person's doing to sabotage you and your client relationships, maybe you and some employee stuff. And we know like, hey, if something were to happen with this relationship, it can kind of be, you know, a back and forth with them. It can we might lose a client, we might lose some relationships because of the way this thing's playing itself out. So, trying to not get something all the way to that level to make it so bad before you do something is some of what our intention. And Matt, I know that you've been in situations yourself as a business owner and consultant. You've seen some of these things play out.
Oh, firsthand. I mean, there's a great quote from the TV show Deadwood where it says, "Change isn't looking for friends." And I think every time if you have to get into that situation and let someone go, or whether they see it coming or not, it's going to change things. I think when I'd set up my second studio, I was 3 months in, and it was revealed that my business development guy was someone had accused them of sexual harassment. And then as I started to dig into it, I found out that they had my credit card details on their phone and they were sharing with people in the office. And then I found out I got on their laptop, I found that they'd signed a lease agreement and forged my signature. And
Oh my gosh.
like all these things that happened. And not only that, they were also they were an ex-commando. So they were like physically threatening and then doing worse things. Every time I looked into it deeper, something was happening. I was just like, I've got to do something about this. And so I called them to a meeting, and then I also told everyone in the office. This is back when everyone was in the office. You all have to leave at 3 p.m. And I got my IT person online. I had them ready to cut them off. I made a code word called, I think it was Eagle Strike or something. So I was going to text this code word. Like the minute they
Right.
come in, like, cut the email. I arranged for a locksmith to come in and change all the locks as soon as it was over. And I also arranged for I had to go, who's the person in this office that could handle things if this got physical? And ironically, it was my bookkeeper. And like you don't really think of bookkeepers as being physically capable, but my bookkeeper was this big South African surfer. So he was like, "But if anyone can handle things, Rob can." So I just said, "Rob, I need you to come to this meeting at 3. This is what's going to happen, and I just need another presence here." And he didn't say anything, but it was really good to have someone else there. And it all happened very quickly. It was really quite, I don't like confrontation as a person. I'm good at it. I avoid it when I can. But this was, yeah, the most confronting thing I had to do. And then I was left without a business development guy. And then the producer that had made the accusations ended up leaving anyway. And so then I was down a producer and a business development person. And I
Shit.
was 3 months into a new business. So it was like
Yeah.
it was not good, but it was had to be done.
Yeah, the hardest is often when it's a person that is higher ranking, a leadership person, a person that you had to give some level of trust. So a level of clearance in a way for your credit card information or some understanding that you're putting them in a role of decision making where they're going to spend your money or make deals on your behalf. And there are levels in all of our production companies right now that we are giving out authority somewhat in all levels. And that designation of authority, and then have that person commit fraud, take something from you, change passwords, do outreach to people around you, any of that stuff, you're just realizing like it's more, it feels like a personal affront because you're
Yeah.
you're also that level of trust almost hurts you personally, and it's hard to rebuild that trust level again
Oh no,
with
that's the
anybody.
hardest. That's the first thing that's so hard to get past is like why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Haven't we done this together? And then secondly, I think particularly in this age of digital, having all your information online, trying to lock everything down and trying to keep stuff from just flying out the door is so hard.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the challenge that we're often up against too is like the difficulty of the change, as you're saying. picking up the pieces afterward. We kind of also noticing that there's a loss no matter what. That person and their relationships kind of might split the group. It kind of might create some kind of chaos, or a salesperson, a upfront person who's developing relationships will tell
Mm.
their side of the story. There's always some sort of like hurt or loss, and you are thinking preservation. I don't want that to happen. So you eat more and more and more pieces that even cause further damage. And I think that's where I say, like, let's kind of like, you have to deal with the reality sometimes. And it's not easy in any situation to kind of to deal with this reality, but it could be it could cause even greater harm. And I think that's, as I said, if there's anything you can learn from our mistakes, this is the one of like, how do you get some trusted situation and get past it, and work through it. Here's the kind of like tipping point I want to work with people is, if you know there's no hope of any positive change in this person in the future, would you still keep them? It's
Mm.
there's an investor question that goes the same way. If you weren't going to buy that investment today, why are you keeping it? The same is kind of true with people. It's like, hey, I had the best hope for you, but the way you're behaving, or these actions that you have, or this, no matter how many times you've apologized, there is nothing that's going to change. I probably need to come to the reality at that point and start doing something. And as we know, Matt, you would back this up, as like, the sooner you do it, the better off you are. The fewer harms that person will do as the future plays itself out. But it's not always easy or clear, because that person will do harm upon leaving too. So there's like this instant measurement of like, well, the harm they're doing now compared to the harm that they can do is something we're always second guessing. And it's hard to, make that decision in that moment.
Yeah, and once you start that conversation, you've got to be ready for it, and you've got to be ready for everything that comes after it. And I think quite often people wish this just wasn't happening, and they sit in a little warm bath of denial, going, "Why? I just wish this would go away." And you've got to get out of that and jump into the ice bucket of change.
Yeah, I know that as a consultant, I'm an outside person, so I have the benefit of not feeling the personal harm that someone's doing to me. So I can often be like a person someone can bounce those ideas off of. And I think, kind of like knowing both sides of the equation, how much easier it is being someone disconnected and making a decision that seems so logical, and then being a person that is connected, and how hard it is to make that decision when it's happening to you. Um,
Mm.
but it is something you have to kind of make it. So I asked myself the question and kind of thought through, Matt, you kind of pitched into this too. Like, I wanted to know like why owners do wait too long. Um, and often waiting feels safer than acting, but then the reality is it's safer until it isn't. So one, I think that hope as a management strategy is one of the first reasons why we wait too long. Well, I just hope that they change. I hope it's not that bad. I hope they're not doing that kind of harm. And I know that there are probably signals that I've received in the past in situations I've been in that I should have pursued. Somebody told me something, or I heard something. And then once you kind of know reality, then you go backwards and all the pieces fall in order. But there is something of like, well, hope doesn't really work. It's so much better to face the truth and kind of get the information up front, from the beginning. Even if it's not something you're going to want to find out, it's better to move beyond that. Um,
Yeah.
this is a big one, Matt, for you, kind of like the sunk cost of time, trust, and history. There is something that to do that change, like you're saying, reboot that producer. You're almost like, gosh, do I have to do that now? I would have to get a whole new team or a whole another person to do that.
Yeah. There's expense either way, but you can just weigh up the cost of, like, you're going to lose more by keeping this person, and you're a small business. Like, you can't afford to employ someone that's doing nothing or doing harm just because you don't feel like dealing with an awkward situation, or because you just wish that they would improve.
Yeah, just yeah. Again, hope is not a management strategy.
Hope isn't a strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's one, like, I think many of us have a gracious heart and gracious understanding, so we give people the benefit of the doubt. But I want to be really clear that confusing patience with leadership is another reason why we wait too long. We're thinking like, well, we'll give them one more chance or forgive them this time. and we're not really recognizing the big pieces, and we're thinking that's a good leader. In other words, what we're doing is saying, as a leader, I'm willing to take on more of harm against me because that's what leadership must be, is that person that takes on that harm. And give people patience so that they can grow and they can experience and they can have a fulfilled life, even though the harm's coming against me. Totally sabotaging yourself in the long run. Not a great way of kind of being a leader. And this last one, I think, is the one where if I'm working with people often and walking through the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, this is the one of like, what if I'm wrong? And then what happens when that person goes in the marketplace? They're going to say, I'm going to be seen as the bad guy. Somebody's going to go spread rumors about me. And that knowledge that that's happening out there feels so crushing because you know you're making the hardest decision possible. You've weighed all the possibilities. You actually don't want to believe that this person is doing harm to you or your business. And then when you finally get to that point, then you're going to be seen as the bad guy. That's just like being hit again, like when you're down, kind of a thing. So that little bit of fear is probably the hardest and last one we have to get over is what will other people think of me if I do this? Uh, that can really slow things down and stop any kind of decision making. Um,
Yeah.
so so here's something I think would be cool to kind of process is why do we wait until there's harm before we finally decide it's too much? Um, I kind of like I think that we all as business owners kind of know that there are moments where we can see something and we're seeing the warning, but it's really hasn't caused harm yet. And we hold on a little bit too long, and then someone finally does that act of harm or crosses a certain line. And then we finally act instead of doing it one step before. Um, so I kind of be curious, like, what are people's thoughts of like decisions you've had to make or what holds you back? If we could help someone else not make the same mistakes that we've made in the past, how could we,
Yeah.
what were the warning signs for you?
Yeah, I had to get rid of someone from my team in a different situation, and I guess I was being edged, and I definitely waited 2 or 3 months where from the minute I'd been told you have to get rid of them to like they end up finally getting rid of themselves in a spectacular fashion. But uh, yeah, I wished I'd act. I mean, if they've got half a brain, they know that this is not working, and
Yeah.
it's not a
Yeah.
surprise. I think we internalize these things like, oh my God, like they know, like they know it's not working, and quite often they're quite happy to let you um, pay them for another few months while you be nice
Yeah.
or by while you think you're doing the right thing by not doing anything about it. So I think yeah,
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in like that people self-sabotage. They know it's not working out. They don't know how to express that through emotion or being mature or understanding. So they actually start doing harm so that you have to do the act of breaking up with them.
yeah,
And in the
Right.
meantime, it doesn't hurt to, you know, s somewhat, pull assets aside or, kind of control certain narratives. While you're waiting, they're gaining ground. So they're sabotaging
Yep.
themselves, sabotage the relationship, and then waiting for you to do the moment, and they gained in that whole time. But I find it interesting that whatever we've learned, either as business owners or citizens of the world or whatever that is, that you're supposed to basically default to trust, default to grace, forgive beyond limits feels really good. Those are the positive things that we learn that often help with grace and understanding and growth and humanity. But the thought that you have to be a punching bag along the way and not be really, really clear. I wish I was stronger at that. There are people that I highly respect that I feel like make that decision more clearly sooner than I do. Um, and I think that's good. It's that self-preservation is pretty amazing.
yeah. How have you helped people start that conversation? Like as an outsider, as a consultant, what have you told people to look out for?
And you mean specifically like how do I help people come to terms with that this is the time to make that change?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I often recognize that there is a pattern, and the person might not be recognizing that they've given me a series of data points as I've talked to them over a few weeks or even a few days sometimes, that they've kind of downloaded to me things that they wanted me to know. And they, in a way, like I've drawn a conclusion before they have, because I've heard that pattern and they're just venting a problem or recognizing the issues on a surface, but they have that hope behind their thoughts. I don't have, I don't, I'm not, I don't have that ownership in that moment.
Mm,
So just like if I could, like if you could like reflect and write down all your thoughts and look at your own pattern, it'd be great. I often feel like because someone is telling me and I'm an outsider, I can draw the conclusion sooner. But in the
mm,
moment at the time, no, it's a lot of confidence boosting, to be honest. It's going to be okay. It's going to be really challenging. We can get past it. We've done it before. This is the marketplace. This is very common, and not like leave too much to like the future is really, really, really bad if I do this. Because in most cases, it's often not. Like
yeah.
once the breakup is done, kind of like it plays itself out and everything's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in my happy breakup story, when I split up with my business partner, we'd been working together for 13 years, and we just got to a bad point where we could not communicate, and everything we did was like we were clashing on everything. But when we finally had that conversation, it happened in half an hour. Like it was so quick. And then he said, "Thank you. Like I should have." He said, "I should have done this. I should have done this a long time ago, but I didn't know what you were going to do." And I'm really glad it was such a relief. I mean, it's such a relief. I ended up slamming a hand in a door because I just wasn't even thinking. I was actually felt quite giddy with relief. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
not always
sweet.
bad.
Yeah, it's not always bad. And again, like I think people do, as you said before, people do know the truth. This is like
Yeah.
to some degree, like there are real patterns that are part of this decision making. And I like to point out with my clients that a series of incidents are a pattern. Like that's what you're looking at. Like they feel like they're somewhat bespoke. They seem like they're one-off moments, but when they're happening frequently or they're happening at certain situations, that's the pattern. You always know that person's going to respond in that way. And this doesn't have to be like the worst case scenario. This could just be somebody who you is handling an area of business of yours that you know and you've given them feedback and they still can't deliver or they still can't get over that moment or they still have that leadership issue and that problematic moment is actually a bigger area of costs for you than just delivering a project, but we keep just putting it to like, well, that project was difficult or that project was difficult or those type of projects, and then we start like catering more and more of, oh, projects of that type in that budget range, and we keep qualifying this more and more and more so to make that person successful, but we really have lowered the bar down to such a degree it's doing harm to the business, doing harm to your relationships, and that individual is not, if you don't address it, that person's not maturing and growing. So
Mm,
this series of problems are really the things we kind of look at, and if we look at them critically, we can start seeing where the pattern is, and then make that harder decision when it's time. Um, Not what we're talking about here. We're actually looking at repeated behavior, and that repeated behavior might come out in different ways, but it's always the same aggression or the same loss, or and I find more and more that victimhood, like it's always your fault, I'm always the victim, and trying to control that narrative. Those things are the really clear warnings of like, wait a second, if you're always going to be a victim, there's no growth here. It can't always be my fault as a business owner. We got to make a change. And we are talking about the moment where we have to actually let that person go, not one-off incidents where correction is there. It's the constant recognizing it's never going to be there. And maybe like you're saying with your business partner, Matt, maybe it's a win-win. Hey, that letting that person go lets that person go thrive somewhere else because they're not thriving with you and you can do something different.
yeah. I mean,
To me, like
we
I
got to the
know
point.
this is the one. Oh, go ahead.
I just, my pitch to him of why we needed to do it is like, if we do this now, we can both walk away with careers. But if we wait another 6 months, we're going to lose everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
To me, this next one is like a total personality disorder, if you ask me. It's the person has learned how to apologize. They've learned the key words. They learned how to sound, sad. They learn how to sound like this is going to make a change, and then no change really happens. And to some degree, we have to often recognize when there's a personality trait that we can't get past. I think there are personality traits that can be very harmful. Many of them are, could even to be a point of sociopathy, and sociopathy is not very easily recognized, but can be there. At least narcissism, especially in our industry, narcissism is probably more aggressive because that is confused with being creative or being a creative leader, kind of has those elements to it. But there's some harms that can be done. So this apology without change, or specifically gaslighting, are things that clearly you can't get past. That's an issue you need to recognize sooner or later, and then put yourself in a healthy place. You do not need to correct someone else's long-term personality behaviors. You might want to call it out, but it is not your burden as a business leader to do it. Maybe as a partner, maybe as a friend, but business owners have to kind of recognize that. And those personality disorders are the ones that can actually kind of step over the line and actually take from you. Here's an easy thing to kind of recognize too: when the team is adapting around the problem. That it's this an example of this in everyday life are we call them children of alcoholics. People that have learned how to navigate around dad when he's a drunk or whatever, and that becomes a long-term behavior around a group of people. Problematic people also do that with our own companies, and we have to be very careful when we're making excuses or adapting all changes around one individual because they can't handle the feedback.
Yeah. I will say one thing about that. Like, I had this client that came online mid-year last year, and when we're in that stage of trying to figure things out and things like that, it's like you can kind of see the problems pretty quickly, but you can't really. You've got to get the client to essentially understand or realize what you can already see, because they haven't been seeing it for years. And it was that was the case with this client. They had a client that really kind of locked, or a producer that had kind of locked down relationships and communication. And it was clear we needed to let this person go. And I just remember I met with the owners afterwards. And I mean, his statement to me was, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much we'd been running our company to accommodate this one person rather than getting the right people to be a part of our company. And it was a real eye-opening moment for them to recognize that.
Yeah, that's it.
I would just say one other thing, just as we've been talking through this, and this is like a little bit hard to say because we should have this opinion and this desire to serve our team no matter what, but like, it's gonna be lopsided. Your employees almost never feel the same level of commitment, of obligation, of appreciation for you and the company than you do for them. It's funny. You can take someone from the very beginning stages of their career, elevate them, promote them, invest in them. And then for some reason, when things go south just slightly, like they're ready to cut bait. They don't have that same shared experience of you investing in them or they feel they're continued to be owed something.
Yeah.
That's not always the case, but it's been the case way more often than it's not.
Yeah. It's almost like surprising because you would want, let's say, like the love you give them to return and back. But I often realize in the relationship they're having, it's an exchange. It's like a marketplace exchange. And they've accepted a job and they're willing to do something, but they have their own career to manage. And you are part of a stepping stone in that career. Sometimes it can be very long, very fruitful, and a great partnership. But often, like it in that exchange, people are greedy and they're selfish, and they'll just think that they own something more than they do.
Again, I'm not saying we should start living our lives like every employee that works on our teams is a greedy miser who's just trying to take advantage of us. That's not true. But you're going to give more than you get. That would be how I'd express that.
It's interesting how fast people want to own the positive side and not on the negative side of the situation. You know, I think that in a way, Jason, you're kind of hitting the line where like almost where like credits are due. And a lot of people believe in trying to get credit for their effort, get credit for the title that they played, and often want more credit than they deserve in that situation.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
something that you can kind of like systematically work out, or kind of like, you know, write some policies, have some understanding with your team. The more upfront you are, more direct you are with that, the clearer it can be. And my wife likes to remind me, clarity is kind, right? It, like to just hide it and hide it and hide it and keep catering to it, opposed to be really clear in those situations are great. And that's credit when someone steps over the line to like ownership and present themselves as owner of your business, are making certain decisions, or create some confusion in the marketplace of who owns what piece of something. That's where you're getting into dangerous territory. Employees do not have ownership rights of things, and you should be really, really clear that who owns something, how it's played out, and how those that you know those decisions should be made with as clear as possible. That can be very challenging, and I think if you have partners or multiple offices or doing things in different segments of business, it can kind of get confusing. So as often as possible, you kind of need to lock that stuff up and remind people that's there. Yeah, it is. It's so much easier in hindsight to understand this. It's so much easier from the outside to understand these things. The last of these incidents is just when coaching turns to covering. You know, that somebody has put you in the place of a mentor, what they've really done is manipulate you to be their advocate. And they keep coming back to you as coach or mentor or buddy or whatever, and saying, hey, between the two of us, I'm going to tell you, you know, I'm dealing with this, or secretly having this problem or whatever. And so you're kind of saying, oh, now that you told me this in confidence, I have to cover for you. And I say, like, that's another tricky situation we can find ourselves in as humans, but it can be very tricky in a business situation, especially when there are, you know, Matt, like going back to the fraud that you experienced, but there are fraudulent situations, there are criminal situations, there are personal situations, there are relational situations, you know, affairs and stuff that are happening in people's marriages that are really clear warnings that the stability of an individual. And if it comes into your business, you have to be really, really clear and understanding of drawing those lines. It's not great, because we do, as Jason pointed out, have more concern often for others than they do for you and your business. And those lines can be crossed very easily and create some issues for you.
Mm.
I just want to point out things that I think are probably pretty easy to understand, but these hidden costs of delay, the costs you're avoiding today really are compounding quietly. So morale erosion, that one's really clear. Often what we can find that one and know that other people are telling us it's not great to work with that person, or that person is really aggressive, or that person keeps, you know, blaming others for something. And that morale erosion really gets, your team is going to leave around you if you don't do something. And you have to kind of take care of the all situation there. High performers and client disengagement is very easy with that stuff. Clients that are leaving you, or other leaders that are basically not telling you the truth, just walking away because someone is overstepping their bounds. Your own personal time drain. So what it means to you to keep something going when someone is just constantly taking from you, and you're working double, triple because that person's not stepping up to what their responsibilities are. And here's one that is often hidden until it's not, which is the legal and operational exposure. And those are really bad days when you know, a lawyer, a government authority, or something basically gives you the wake-up call that there's a really bad situation. This could happen in an audit where the financials are being moved. These are very, very common things. And again, even worse when one partner is doing it to another. So these are really important things to keep your eyes on. Don't let them just hide away, and deal with them as soon as possible. If you have to bring an outsider, do it. There are experts out there, lawyers and CPAs and things that can help kind of draw attention to this thing. So you can work with other bodies to get this stuff done as well. All right, so here's like the 3 big thoughts I just want to put out there. Anyone watching this video, anybody that is a business owner, anyone that's dealing with these issues, these are the things we kind of wanted you to know that are true. We all face it, and I think this is where community helps. I know in situations I've been in, I reached out to people that I trusted as business owners, and I talked to 3, 4, 5, 6 different people, kind of got all the different angles before I would act. And that is really great to have a network of people around you so we can ask these questions and kind of hold some accountability, kind of work past that. Am I doing something wrong or doing something too fast? So keep these questions in mind for yourself or for others, and allow this to play itself out. The first one is, what patterns have you been hoping would change? So if you're talking to yourself, you're talking to someone, other business owner, and they're saying, I have a problem, this is a great big question. Well, what did you hope would change when you talked to them? What did you hope they would do when you gave them that direction? And then make a note of what you are quietly working around. So that change isn't happening. So you've diverted the work or diverted the team around that person. That's a clear warning sign right away that that person is somewhat problematic. And if they're not going to change, like the first question I asked, if it's not going to change, would you, like, are you ready to deal with that issue or start preparing yourself to deal with that issue? The second big question is, what decision feels so heavy because it's overdue? So think of excuses you've made on behalf of this person. I know in situations I've been personally exposed to, that heaviness is often something like, it's going to take me weeks or months to kind of work through something. And it would be so much easier if that person just stepped up and solved that problem. Or in the worst case scenario, just wishing it away. Gosh, I wish that person just didn't have to deal with that. And those bigger harms really come with even more regret and more wishing and more hoping. So that overdue feeling is really it. And I think when you recognize when you're making excuses on behalf of somebody, when you have to think of an excuse, should be your very first warning. And this is absolutely the thing I want you to learn from other people's mistakes, and mine specifically too. It's like those excuses are the warning sign that something is bigger, is wrong underneath the surface. And it's time to stop putting your head in the sand and start doing something different. And then lastly, what are the real costs that you have endured? And how bad does it need to get? So, I know there are situations where there is money harm or creative, like personnel, client issues, lies that are told, and you've kind of endured it. You think of yourself as stronger, more powerful, a leader, whatever, and you're supposed to endure it. And those real costs, when you start adding them up, compound. So if you're working with somebody or recognizing those, or questions you can ask yourself or others is, what are those real costs that you've had to endure? Add those up, and it becomes very obvious, like you should do something sooner than later. And I know there are steps, and as Matt, you point out, like sometimes you have to like bring in the heavy, bring in the more buff person to kind of deal with the situation because you might think it might get physical, or you have to lock the doors or get IT on hold and have to deal with the rumors and all that stuff. But it's well worth it to stay healthy, and kind of deal with that bad moment, then kind of just let this thing draw out.
I think, yeah, I read a lot of Stoic philosophy, and there's something in Stoicism which is about there are things that you can control and things that you can't, and you just need to look at what can you control and what can you do about a situation. There are things that you won't be able to change in another person. There are things you won't be able to change in a situation, but if it's your business, you've got to look after it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you have a business partner, like make sure everyone knows what's on the inside of every book, every document, what's there. It's not worth like having one person have one set of knowledge and not be telling the other person what's going on with finances, what's going on with taxes, what's going on with that relationship, what's going on with that lawsuit. Like don't avoid any of that stuff. Make sure you understand it to the greatest of your ability, regardless if that other person's ready to tell you all the information. You need to ask your own questions, and feel free to go around that individual and find out the truth from whatever authority is telling it to you. If your CPA is telling your business partner something and they're translating it to you, you should go talk to your CPA and ask them directly what's going on, and so that you understand and you're comfortable, because you're making those decisions with them. It's absolutely not worth waiting till the worst gets worse. There's already enough fraud. There's already enough ways of hiding it from you there's already plenty of things that you could not have known until it's too late. So when you get those warning signs, it's really important to recognize them and find that out to your likeness. And your hope can possibly be a reality. Like you're hoping it's not bad, go find out. Oh, it's not bad. Okay, good. That's what you're doing, but you have to fill in that responsibility when you can. All right, I kind of said like up front, like this is a heavy topic. It's not one that's we really like to promote or put out there. I think that, a lot of situations that we get ourselves in at RevThink is dealing with change in businesses, change in leadership, and walking people through it. So it's not comfortable for us to talk about it because we've often helped our clients go through these situations. And we don't want to give up too much or make anyone think we're talking about a specific person. But there are like specific incidents that we've seen, had our hands on, walked through with people. And if you can learn from their mistakes, it'd be so much better than having to endure this yourself.